TECNO. So right now I have Mr. Paul Turley with me. He is from Europe. I think, good morning, Paul. He is going to speak about a journey to cage-free for 1 hour. Paul is the Global Products and Solution Manager from AGCO. So I pass the stage to Paul.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Miss Rose, for the introduction. Very kind. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to the presentation this afternoon, and then also thank the organisers for inviting us to make this presentation to you. Let me just start sharing the screen. And then we can begin. Okay, is that clear? Everyone see?
Yes, Paul.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, introductions first. My name is Paul Turley. I'm 53 years old, been 30 plus years in the poultry industry. 5 years were spent with one of the largest egg producers in the UK, and every subsequent year has been spent with solution providers and equipment developers that are involved in the poultry equipment supply market. Now, what I'll do, if that's okay for now, is I will switch off my video to preserve bandwidth. No, that's not working. Not to worry. We'll leave my cell phone. Okay. To give you a bit of story about the company that I'm representing today. TECNO Poultry Equipment are a company who've been in existence for over 40 years and are located in northeast Italy. As you can see on the small map, they're very close to Venice. 40 years, they've gone through a lot of developments and seen a lot of changes in the industry. And as we've all had to do, is adapt to the changing markets that we're all involved in. I'm very lucky to work with some very talented people. Both within TECNO, but then also within AGCO, our holding group across the world. So, you know, we mentioned experience there. We've got 40 years, and if you combine the experience of all the people involved, then there is certainly a lot of knowledge within the group and within the company. Okay, so let's get the presentation rolling, and I thought it was a good point to look at where do we actually start with this journey. How did we get to where we are now with the egg production facilities and industry that we're all happily involved in? And it basically came from the red jungle fowl. Obviously, most of you will know, found in South and Southeast Asia, and this is where the whole journey began for us. And these wonderful little eggs that these ladies used to produce, and we got a taste for. Okay, then what happened is that because we enjoyed these eggs, we had the scientists and the geneticists back then in the day, many moons ago, who started to tinker with the bird, and eventually we developed the domestic fowl, the domestic laying hen. And our progression into egg production then began. And we started off small, as we do on most things, very small backyard farming, you know, providing the laying hen with some feeding space, bit of water, and if she was lucky, a nice house to live in. And the basic, you know, pretense was to feed really either, you know, family or a small community. And as we do in life, things evolve and things become more commercialized. And so what happened is people started to expand their production operations, and started to look at different ways of housing the birds, feeding the birds, drinking the birds, and generally trying to extract the maximum results from the hen that they were provided with from the genetics company. So this is a very simple system that you can see. It's a simple open house, no insulation in the roof. We've got manual tube feeders, bell drinkers, and a manual nest system on the end there. So we've got, generally, we're using 2 dimensions of the house area, just the length and the width, and all the birds are on the floor, generally around about 7 birds per meter stocking density. But even though they're in a controlled area, let's say, it's still extremely labor-intensive way to collect and produce eggs. The only automatic thing is the actual bell drinkers that are shown there. And as we all know, if you're managing bell drinkers correctly, you need to be cleaning them at least twice a day, and then manually filling the tube feeders every day, and of course then going in there to collect the eggs. But we've started. We've made a start now. We're getting into commercial egg production. So then, as operations developed more and more, and operations got larger, we started to look more at how we can extract even more potential from the bird, and it was deemed that the best way at that stage was then to start putting these birds into cages. So we've got them away from the litter, we've got them away from their own manure. They're in a cage in controlled small groups, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hens per cage, depending on the size of the cage. And we can control the feeding for them in the feed trough, and they've got access to water. And then, of course, in these pictures that we see, it's an open house, but they've got fresh air moving through, and importantly, no contact with the manure. So that was helping to reduce on disease and cut down on production issues. The system that you can see in the photographs is an automated system there. So that's actually got automatic egg collection on the end, but even you can do basic systems just with manual egg collection, manual feeding from bags, or just a push along feed cart. You can just see a feed cart down there. You could fill that with feed and push that down to feed the birds automatically. So what this did, it made life much easier for the farmer. It allowed him or her to manage more birds relatively easily and get the results that we're always looking for from these hens. Of course, then we still evolve even further, and we get into situations where we have really large producers now, and as a result of that, we've got very large houses, easily from 30,000 to 200,000 birds, all under one roof. So as time developed on, the systems grew, the production methods grew, the configurations grew. We went away from the A-frame system and introduced manure belts into houses, as you can see on this picture on the bottom right, and that allowed us to remove manure on a weekly basis. So again, we're getting the manure away from the birds and trying to keep them as healthy as possible so that we can get the best results from them. Then, as life develops, as we all develop and society develops, people started to look at this production system with birds in cages and weren't exactly comfortable with it. So we had small bodies that were developing and lobbying governments around the world to say it's not the correct way to keep birds in cages. I think this is in developed society where people became more affluent and also have more disposable income. They don't need an egg to survive. It's just a commodity that they buy. So then they started to look more and more at the actual welfare of the laying hen itself. And as a result of that, in all different countries all over the world, We have different welfare groups that, as I mentioned before, they're lobbying government, lobbying politicians. And also, importantly, if we're in a formal market, they started lobbying and putting pressure on to the retailers. And the retailers have listened to this. And so what they have started to do is make more demands on suppliers that they take into account the welfare of the laying hen, and so that they can satisfy the demands of their customers. So we make the first step, and the first step was a relatively simple one, even though it seemed a large one at the time. And so what we did, we transitioned from what we call the traditional cage, just with feeding system in the front, water supply at the back, and a manure belt underneath. And what we did, we opened up all the partitions, or a few of the partitions, to make a larger colony of birds. So instead of being 5, there might be 15, 20, 25, 30 within that particular colony, as you can see in this diagram here. And instead of just being in a cage, we had to enrich that cage. So we needed to introduce an area for them to lay, a laying nest. We had to introduce perches into the systems as well, so that the birds could exhibit natural behavior, perching. You know, at the end of the day, it's a jungle fowl. She's used to perching in a tree, and that still happens today within the genetics of the bird itself. Also, obviously, birds spend time, as we can all see in bird behavior, scratching in litter or on the floor. And so, you know, as part of the enriched cage system, we had to introduce scratch mats. So where you could put a litter or a substrate, in most occasions it's feed, you can see feed would go into there. And that would allow birds to exhibit and perform natural scratching behavior. So that was the first step, is from a traditional cage into an enriched one. It's a very, very good step, but ultimately it's still a cage. And society, or certain areas in society, said this is great, but still, you know, the bird is in a cage. You've enriched its environment, but we like to see them roaming around as free as possible within the house. And so we all needed to start looking at providing solutions and systems to satisfy these demands of the retailers, their clients, and of course our customers as well. So all the time this has been happening, the bird's been changing as well. You know, the breed companies have been working really, really hard over the years to get the bird to eat as little food and produce as many eggs as possible, and with a good livability. So you can see in nature, 8 to 12 eggs per year would be expected. In the 1900s, we would be around about 120, and today we're 300 plus. So, you know, today's laying hen is, you know, she's a little bit like a Formula One car. And so to extract the best out of her, extract that full genetic potential, we've got to make sure that we give her all the conditions necessary so that she can produce as many eggs as possible with the littlest amount of food. Obviously, we're all commercial at the end of the day. So where do we start? Rearing. Rearing is the key to success. It's you know, everything starts with rearing. In cage production, it's really, really important. But also when we get to let's call it cage-free production, it's even more important. So we really, really have to make sure that we're going to rear a pullet that's strong, robust, and importantly, able to jump from different levels, from the floor to nests, or from the floor to perches, because we are going to introduce systems where they're no longer two-dimensional, just on the floor. We actually use the height as well by introducing different levels. So the bird needs to be able to move from one level to another to find nesting space, feed space, and drinking space as well. So if we look at the old traditional system, we used to rear them in cages. It's not going to work for a bird that's going to go into a cage-free environment. Believe me, we tried in the UK many years ago and realised it failed. And I think a lot of countries and customers who have gone down this route thought, yeah, it'll be fine. The birds will learn. No, it's not. It's really tough. We need to start as we mean to go on, and develop the bird and rear the bird for the system where she's going to spend the majority of her life. Even two-dimensional rearing, as you can see on the floor, is still not going to give us the results. It'll be a bit better than coming from a cage, but still, we're only working on two planes, so the length and the width of the building. We're not actually teaching the bird to jump in that system there. What we have to remember, of course, all the way through this as well, is that the clients have different demands. You know, we've got clients that like basic systems. There are clients who like more complex systems, and there are also, you know, varying budgets that they've got available to invest in these systems. So as solution providers, we need to try and cater for all those demands to give clients the best value for money that they have available to invest in those projects. So that's an important point when you can see the journey into the development of the various systems. So one way we could think to improve the rearing of these birds that are going into cage-free systems could be with the simple introduction of A-frames. So A-frames put into the house so that the birds can then jump up and perch and stand on the systems and learn to get from one level to another. It's a good solution. It will certainly help, but it's still not going to give us the results that we need, because predominantly a bird will only go up there to perch maybe a little bit during the day, but at night, and she's only going up there to rest. She's not going up there to feed. She's not going up there to drink. All that is down on the floor. So she will be conditioned to realise that the feeding and drinking is on the floor, and all I'll be doing is going up onto the perches to rest at night or get away from stronger birds during the daytime. So will certainly help build a stronger bird. It'll get her used to jumping, but it's still not the best, shall we say, solution for cage-free production. So if we still look at the traditional floor system, one way we can help this is to introduce winchable platforms into the rearing house. So these can be plastic slatted or a wire mesh platform that goes down the length of the house. And you'll notice that on these I've put all the nipple drinkers. So basically, as the birds get older, we start winching these systems to different heights. And what we get the bird used to, she'll realise that if she wants to drink, she's got to actually go onto a different level. So some people like to leave one down on the floor. We have rules and regulations in Europe that actually say you must do that as well in these types of systems. But the general way to manage these operations is to put the drinkers above the platforms, winch the platforms, and by that method, if a bird wants to drink, she's got to jump. So she learns to jump from one level to another, and also to find at least one of the things, you know, out of the feeding, nesting space, perching space, and drinker space that she's going to find in a traditional free-range system. But if we want the actual perfect start for the systems that these birds are going to go to in the long run, then we need to look at aviary rearing systems. These are systems designed specifically for rearing birds who are going to transition to some form of aviary cage-free production system. Two systems that I'm showing you, two styles. We've got one called the Ideal Fast system, which is effectively, it's a traditional rearing cage with modifications made to be able to open it up and allow the birds to come out and move around in the house as she gets older and grows bigger, get her used to jump into different levels. And then we have what we call AS227 system. This is much more, shall we say, tailored specifically to birds that are going to transition and be placed into an aviary production. So we've got all the feeding, all the drinking, all the perching, all enclosed within the system. But also we've got actual different levels within the system as well. And you'll see as I go further into the presentation that's going to be, that becomes really, really important to get the birds used to jumping from one level to another and moving within the system. If you think about it, back to the jungle bird, how did she move? She used to get into the tree and move from branch to branch, but generally still within the tree itself. So it's to allow natural behavior and natural movement to take place. Example of a cross section of a two-story building that we've installed before, just to show you the principles. So we can see everything's in rows, typical cage configuration. The big difference being that we can actually open up the fronts of the cages as the birds get older to allow them to move out of the cage and also use the floor and get used to jumping from different levels to find feed, water and drink. One thing that's not shown on here, and one thing that's important in all of these systems is lighting and the position of lighting, because we use the position of the lighting and the lighting levels to actually draw the birds back into the system at night, because that's what we aim for. Ultimately, we want the birds to sleep within the system and not actually on the floor. And that's any system, that's any rearing system, any production system. This is where we're training them to do that. Difference that you can see here as well is that we've got some air drying units, because we have certain rules and regulations in countries where you have to dry the manure. Most people would not do it if they've got the option, but in certain countries you have to dry it because it needs to be transported away. And the easiest way to do that and the cheapest way is if it's dry as possible and you're not transporting liquid slurry effectively. Just some photographs to give you an example. So here you can see where the chicks are in the system at the start. We've got good access, chicks can't get out, but we can get in there to check them. It's also good for vaccination purposes. It's quite easy to control them from a vaccination perspective because you've got them in controlled groups as opposed to all running around on the floor. So it makes the management certainly easier. And then you can see as the birds get older, they then start to venture out and they get used to jumping in and out of the system onto different levels. And then also scratching around in the litter area during the daytime. Just an example there for the AS227, the alternative system that's available. Again, principles are the same. We've got feeding, drinking, perching, everything is enclosed within the system. The one thing that you'll see on all the larger systems is that the floors are empty of any equipment. There's no feeding, there's no drinking down there. The only thing that you'll see generally is in the center there, we put scraper systems underneath each row so that we can reduce the amount of litter that's in there. So the whole aim of this is that feeding, drinking, perching, all enclosed within the system, so that the bird knows, if I want to do that, I've got to go in the system. I'm not going to get feeding, water or drink down here. So it's conditioning the bird so that eventually she'll know that she's going to go in the system to do that, and then also find the nest to lay the egg and prevent or reduce floor eggs. That's also obviously key to this rearing process. That's one of the ultimate aims that we want to achieve. Just some photographs there, just to give you examples of what the AS227 system looks like in reality. You can see it's a much larger machine than like the traditional open cage system. As I say, it's an evolution. That's what the whole process is through this journey. We're evolving all the way through and retweaking and redesigning systems to get the birds more suited to the production environment that they're going to go in. You can see the chain feeders with perching and feed saving lips to prevent feed wastage, and then also winched nipple drinker systems to get the birds used to jumping onto perches, and using also the perch on top to get into the platform in the center there. So there's a lot of thought gone into these systems, and it's all to prepare the hen for when she goes into the production environment. Okay, so far we've produced our quality pullet, and now she's going to go into the laying environment. And as I mentioned before, we've got, you know, we have to cater for different clients' needs and different clients' budgets. And so there are various stages and various configurations that are available to suit budgets and to try and give our customers the best value for money. So here on the first one, if you look, it's very, very similar to the original photograph that I showed you of the pen system, with just a small colony of 2,000 birds. But we've already made improvements when we look at what we're doing here. You know, instead of tube feeders, we're using an automatic chain feeder, or of course you can use pan feeder system as well. And then the other thing that we're doing, instead of using bell drinkers, we've switched to a nipple drinker system, which is, in my opinion, and I think in most people's opinion, by far the best system for giving water to laying hens. And then what we could also do here is introduce a perch above that nipple drinker line, so that at least we've got the bird jumping from one level to another and somewhere to roost at night. Manual nest, you can see we've gone from the wooden box. These are typically steel boxes now, 24-hole nest boxes that are spread equally down the length of the house. And you see what we're doing here, we're already starting layouts, very, very important. So we're trying to get the water system as close to the nest as possible, because typically a bird's going to eat, drink, lay. So it's better to keep these drinkers as close to the nest, because if we park a drinker over here or over on this side, then she's got drinking, she's got feeding, and she's got a nice litter area. So she will be quite happy to lay her eggs there, which we don't want. Ultimately, we want as many eggs as possible in the nest. So we've got to position feeders, drinkers, etc. in such a way that it draws the hen to the nest to ensure that we get, you know, as many first-class eggs in those nests as possible, and not dirty floor eggs. Also, obviously, floor eggs from a labour perspective, it's back-breaking. Somebody's got to go in there and physically pick these things up all day long. It's not a pleasure. So the more we can reduce it, the better. Okay, so that's with a simple manual nest system. The next step up is to change that to a community nest, a communal nest. So here the difference is that we've got a row of nests all the way down the center of the building, all joined together, not individual 24-hole nest boxes. They typically will have an automatic egg belt in the center. And you can see here that we've got perch slats on each side to allow the birds to get onto the slats and then enter into the nesting area on each side, lay the egg transfers onto the egg belt, and they can all be collected automatically at the end of the row. So what we're doing here straight away, it's a reduction in labour and labour requirement. And also, obviously, it reduces the interaction of people into the bird area itself, because whilst we always try to show, you know, biosecurity and practice very good biosecurity, we are one of the most common carriers, I would say, of germs and bugs into poultry houses. And so if we can reduce the amount of people going in and around that house, then hopefully that can also improve the biosecurity and the health of the birds. Okay, so typically, again, this is still classed as a deep litter system. So you would be roughly around about 7 birds per square metre on that. Okay, next step. Next step is a system that we've used traditionally for many years in Europe. So we've got the same automatic nesting system down the centre of the building, but you'll see now we've got slats each side of the nest, and all the feeders and all the drinkers are on the slats. So remember before I mentioned litter, nothing on there whatsoever. Everything is on the slat close to the nest, so the bird can eat, drink, lay, and then she can come down here later just to exhibit scratching behavior and resting and yeah, downtime, let's say. But we don't want to encourage any eggs in this area. So this is a traditional, we call it in the UK, a flat deck system. That would generally allow you to increase your stocking density between 9 and 12 birds per square metre. So you do get a bonus. And also what we're doing, manure, most of the manure, I will say, is collected underneath a slat area. So you take that out once a year at the end of the flock. So again, we're trying to reduce contact between birds and their own manure and improve that health and the results that we get from those birds. Okay, so then we've, as I mentioned before, when in the cage journey that we went through, we've got larger producers who have larger demands for larger flocks. So we have to provide larger systems and more complex systems that can cater for these clients' requirements and needs. And the simplest form is what we call the VS series. It's a voliere system. Some people call them combi cages. Again, it's basically, the easiest way I can describe it is a large enriched cage, but then with the doors open. You can see that we've got egg belts on the side, as you see in a traditional cage. And then we've got the nesting area. We've got perches, feeding and drinking within the system. So we could put this traditionally, as we've seen previously, in rows, exactly same as cage producers are used to. So as I mentioned before, we also need clients need to feel comfortable with the new systems that they're introducing. You know, it's a large investment. It's a big gamble ultimately for them, of course. And so the more they can feel comfortable in transitioning from, let's say, a normal traditional cage to a combi system, as we can see here, the easier it's going to be for them, I think, in the long run as well. Same principles apply. We've got scrapers underneath each cage row, but all feeding, drinking, laying is enclosed within the system. So if we want the bird in there to do that, so that all the eggs are laid within here and actually not on the floor. We want to avoid floor eggs at all costs. Here you can see an example on the left with birds in, so you can see that they're out and about, moving on the egg belt covers on the sides of the cages, on the perches, and you can see there's a good distribution of birds, different levels on the floor and generally within the house. The big difference here on all these systems now compared to the systems I showed you previously with the floor systems is that we are now, once again, we're introducing the three-dimensional use of the building. So we're not just using the floor area, we're increasing usable area with all the different levels of manure belts. And by default, we can increase the number of birds that we can stock in that house. So it's also about efficiencies and bums on seats so that we can get the maximum number of birds and the maximum number of eggs from a given floor area. To the right, there you can see just a little bit more of a picture, makes it clearer without birds in. We can still hinge the cage doors so we can train the birds within the system to start with, and then open them up as they get older, and then they can start using the rest of the house. As mentioned, these things, they're constantly evolving. And so then we had to introduce another extension to the range called the AS series, the Aviary system series. And as you can see, these are a different, it's a completely different solution compared to like we've got with the rows of the VS systems in a cage-like arrangement. These are more similar to the arrangements that I showed you previously where people are already used to using a nest system in rows or an automatic nest system. The big difference being is that what we do, we introduce manure belts at different levels to increase the stocking density within the house. Now, there are too many systems here to go through individually, so I'll just focus on two, AS480 and AS580, just to save time for everyone. Here you can see the differences. So now we've got a full system with manure belts, steel wire mesh floors, and then we can see we've got nesting area, and then we've got feeding, drinking, perching, everything all included on these levels. You'll see that the drinkers, same as we mentioned previously, are always close to the nest. So we feed, drink, lay. And then we've also got extra usable area on top of the system there, again, to utilize the volume of the building to try and come out with as many birds as is practically possible and manageable within the floor area of the house that we've got available. Now, as we've seen and used these systems, we have certain clients that say, yeah, this is great, but we've got this area up the top. I want to put more birds in, but I also want to give them the opportunity to be able to stay up there if they wish. So they need to have a nest available to lay their eggs up there. So instead of eggs being laid on here and being collected at this point, some clients say, no, if you put a nest up there, I've got more chance of eggs being laid in the nest and not on the system, because if system eggs roll to these areas here that you can see at the end of the slope on the system. So we have main egg collection areas at the nest, and then we have what we call system egg collection for any eggs that are not laid within the nest. And these are either collected manually, or we can actually automate those collection systems as well. But then it starts to get complex, as you can see, with different equipment in different places just to collect all the eggs from the system. Cross section of an AS480, again, to show you the principles, all the feeding, drinking, everything enclosed within the system. The litter area is purely and simply that. There's only litter underneath, and then we'll apply a scraper system underneath the systems to reduce the litter, again, to make it so that it's not attractive for birds to lay eggs on the floor. Ultimately, we want them in the nests. The beauty of this kind of system as well is that when you first put the pullets into the house, between 16, 17, 18 weeks, it varies in all different countries, you can actually close the birds on the system. So they only have access for as many weeks as you deem necessary, or in certain countries in the UK, you're only allowed to do it for a couple of weeks while the birds settle down. But they can get used to the system. They can find where the feed is, they can find where the water is, and also they can then start exploring the nest and get to know where they've got to lay the eggs before you open them up to the floor. And again, as I mentioned previously, lighting is critical in all these systems. Position of lighting and the way that the lighting is controlled. Ultimately, we want all the birds in there at night to sleep. Just a quick example of the 580 as well, so you can see same principles, big differences that we've got a nest on the top level there. The total aim there is to reduce system eggs and give the birds as much opportunity as possible to lay in the nest. Sadly, as we all know, extra equipment in any way, shape or form leads to an increased cost. So it really is a client's personal choice as to whether they want to make that extra investment to hopefully make their life easier in the long run. Just some quick photos there just to show you system with birds in, so you can see you've got a mixture of birds in the system, birds on the litter area, and here you can see an example of the lighting already in the system. As I mentioned, we use that to get the birds in there at night and roost so that they're not down here during the day. See birds perching nicely and moving around the system there. Feeders, drinkers, and nesting space that you can see at the back, and then a shot from the top where you can see the top nest on the 580 system. Okay, so again, I've mentioned previously that clients need to feel comfortable if they're transitioning from a particular type of system, be it a cage system, into cage free, then as we saw with the VS system, so a client might be more comfortable instead of seeing a portal system as we can see on the AS580s. They're probably more comfortable with the system that's in rows as they used to for managing from the cage experiences. And so from that, we've got what we call the AS250 and the AS310 series. And these are modular solutions that literally are installed into the house in rows as you would with cages. But with this system, you've got no way to enclose the birds onto the system. So it's really, really, really important that the rearing for these types of systems is tip-top. You need a really, really good bird, a well-reared bird that already knows how to jump and move through a system to get the best results from the get-go, and not spend a lot of time collecting floor eggs and things like that. You'll see here there are two solutions available for this particular model. We've got egg belts on the outside, sometimes called side belt, and then also we have a center belt version. It really depends on individual clients' preferences. Some people prefer the egg belt on the outside. It gives them extra usable area so they can get more birds in, and they also say it's quite easy and gives you easy access to the egg belt. Whereas some clients, they'd say, no, I want the egg belts on the inside, completely away from the bird, so that the birds aren't walking over the egg belts to get into the nest. It really is a personal choice and a personal preference for each client. Here you can see a combination. Again, it's another 2-story house. And as I mentioned, we've got 250, 2.5 wide system, and then also the 310, which is a wider one. Again, more usable area, more birds. But here you can see how we can mix the different widths to utilize the floor area that we've got available as much as possible, to give the clients as many birds as they can for that particular concrete footprint of that building. Again, in this case, you can see that the client had a requirement to put manure drying on there to dry the manure for transport away at a later stage. Same story all the way through. The only equipment that you'll see on the floor is maybe a scraper system underneath the cages. No feeding, no drinking, nothing. If they want to eat, drink or perch, they've got to do it within the system, and then hopefully use the nest as well for laying the eggs. Here at the sides, you can see the slopes on the floor. So any eggs that aren't laid in the nest, we call them system eggs. They will appear at the sides here, where they can be collected manually, or if it's a big system, then typically clients would look to put automatic collection on the end of there as well for those system eggs. So main egg collection here. In the center belt, it would be in the middle, and then we've got system eggs on the sides. Just some examples so you could see. This is an example of the side belt house. One thing that I wanted to show you here as well is you can see that the house is divided into different colonies. It's partitioned, and that's because, you know, as we saw in the original pen version, we divide these flocks into colonies of typically between 4,000 and 6,000 birds, depending on rules and regulations within the particular country. Here you can see the cover over the side belt egg collection, and then the nesting system. This is the mechanism for opening and closing the nest floor, because you need to close the nest at night, or at least prevent the birds from staying or roosting in the nest at night, so that the floor is clean and you don't get smothering, and we end up with nice, clean, first quality eggs. Okay. Again, we're evolving all the way through this process, and so you remember I mentioned before about system eggs, because any eggs that are laid on here are on the sides, and some clients said, well, that's great, but I don't want to collect them manually, and B, I don't want to have lots more complex egg collection systems in there. So we then had to design a system called the Loggia, whereby any eggs that are actually laid on the system, you can see, will roll into the nest and onto the egg belt. So that means that we only have one common point on each row for egg collection. We're not needing to collect eggs or gather eggs that might be laid and collected around this point. So everything rolls down the floor, through the nest and onto the egg belt. So again, it makes the process easier for egg collection, and makes it easier for the farmer as well. You'll notice here that with the Logia system, and also with the previous system with the AS250 and 310, they are relatively low systems. They're not really high. And so that's quite good for markets that we see where people are wanting to convert, let's say, existing units into cage free, and they don't have much height. It might be a broiler house, or it might be a broiler breeder, an old broiler breeder house, and they want to change use, or it might be a small cage system from way back in the day. It might only be three, 4 tiers. So these lower systems also lend themselves to be fitted into an existing house. Well, the big story here is the easy collection of the system eggs, because they'll all end up on the main egg collection belt. Again, principles exactly the same as we mentioned before: feeding, perching, drinking close to the nest, and nest. Eat, drink, lay. That's the whole way that we're trying to get these birds behaving in the house. Here you can see an example cross section. So we've got 2 rows. So we would have egg collection on this side and egg collection on this side here. You'll notice even if we've got eggs on the top belt, they can roll over to the side. We put an egg belt in there, and it makes it a lot less complex for egg collection, as we do it just at one common point on each row. Same story, no feeders, no drinkers, nothing on the floor, everything contained within the system. Just some examples there. You can see it in the flesh. This is an installation that we've done recently. So there you can see it without birds in, and then the same shot with birds actually placed. So you can see birds have been reared well, they've been trained well, and there's a good distribution of birds throughout the house on the different levels, and also on the floor as well. So these are finished. The laying process, and they're going scratching around on the floor. You'll notice here that we've got, wherever we close off underneath the system, that can be done either manually or automatically. That's why the birds get used to the system. They're trained to use the system. When we're happy that they're laying most of the eggs in the system, then we open this up and give them full access to the floor area for scratching and dust bathing. Finally, just to introduce one of our newest members of the family, the AS380. We have a lot of smaller farmers and smaller producers, predominantly the ones that are in the niche market for like organic or biological egg production. So small flock sizes, maybe 6,000, 3,000, 6,000, 9,000 birds. But they still want the benefits of using manure belts and extra levels within the system. And so we introduced the AS380 to give them this extra usable area and increase the amount of birds that they can get in the particular floor area of building that they've got. But still, you'll see exactly the same story: feeders, drinkers, and perchers, all with the system. Eat, drink, lay. That's the whole theory, and nothing on the floor apart from, in this case, scrapers once again. Just some general features on systems is that, I mentioned the nest area. We've got really good positive opening and closing of the nest system, and it's really easy to adjust. Solid foldable perches on the sides of systems so that you can keep them out of the way if you're cleaning out litter and catching birds and things, but then also you can put them down to help the birds get into the system, and they're strong enough and robust enough for people to stand on as well. Solid, strong, sturdy designs. At the end of the day, these machines need to last a good number of years because it's quite a high investment. So you need to be sure that what you put in there is going to last for a good lifetime. As I mentioned earlier, automatic or manual closing mesh underneath the system. That's to prevent the birds going under until they're trained to use the system and lay the majority of eggs within the system itself. Winchable back wall nest on the loggia. That's so that you can inspect and get access to the nest from the back easily. And then also you can actually get through to get access to the drinkers, which are just on the other side of that nest should you need to get to them for maintenance. And then ultimately what everyone should be focused on is the high quality materials as well. Okay, for the future, yeah, watch this space. The team, both in Italy and globally, are always working on new developments and new improvements to make life easier for our customers and make the whole process a much more enjoyable and fruitful investment. And there are some really interesting developments coming along, which sadly I can't tell you about at the moment, but as soon as it becomes available, we'll let you know. Many thanks for your attention. That concludes the presentation. So if anyone's got any questions, please fire away.
All right, Paul. Thank you so much. It's quite interesting on the revolution that AGCO TECNO have gone through. So I have question from the audience, and I will hit to one question first, that because in Asia, I would say ASEAN, it's quite new in terms of cage-free, free range, you know, there is still some confusion there. So yeah, from your experience, because you work with a lot of Western that already shift from cage to cage-free system because of the pressure of the retail and customer. So how long it takes in shifting, like let's say for one farm, in order to change, and what is the key things that the farmers who attend in this conference should be aware of and to start thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, crikey, I started my life in the industry in 1990, I think it was. Yeah, 1990. And even at that stage, as I mentioned, I used to work for the largest egg producer in the UK at that stage, a company called Turley Foods. All cages. That's all we were doing, cage production. That's all. Everyone was starting to talk about free range and cage free, but everyone thought it was a pipe dream and would never take off. To give you an example now, it's been a long time coming, but the UK production, over 60% now, is cage free. So markets are evolving and markets are changing constantly. One of the biggest things that we saw is that cage producers, the large cage producers, were kind of one of the last groups to change, if that makes sense. And we tended to see more new entrants coming into farming and doing the smaller traditional systems with the nests and the slats. And then eventually the larger producers saw that, hold on, this thing's coming. We're going to have to do something about it. And then they started looking real small scale, doing the same as the smaller farmers, but then transitioning to the larger systems that I demonstrated and showed later on. But I cannot emphasize enough how important rearing is. It's critical. You know, I've dealt with many cage farmers who say, yeah, it'll be fine. We'll rear in cages. The birds will get, no. It doesn't work. They end up picking up thousands of floor eggs and it's not pleasant. So if I can give one piece of advice, please make sure you get the rearing correct before you start doing the production.
All right. And there is some perception that the cage-free system plus free-range egg always have problem with the sanitation and hygiene. How you give the on that understanding?
Yeah. Again, it's one of those situations because we've gone full circle. So before with cages, we wanted to get birds away from living in their own manure, and now we're going back to it. And so that's why we're introducing the manure belts and the slat systems in, so that the birds have as little contact with the litter with their own manure as possible. And particularly with the aviary systems with the manure belts, because, as I mentioned about lighting and things, we want the birds to sleep in there at night, so that when they wake up in the morning, when they go to the toilet, it's on the manure belt and not in the actual litter itself. So that's one way to try and improve the biosecurity. The quality of the eggs is important, and that's why we want to try to get the birds to lay the eggs in the nests instead of on the floor. So again, training, rearing, really, really important. And then also from biosecurity, as I mentioned, you know, people bring in germs, bugs, disease, no matter how clean and how showered we are, how many times we shower, we can still, we're a point of contact for the birds where we can introduce disease. So if clients are able to make the investment, then automate as much as possible to take that human element away and reduce that risk of disease challenge.
All right, and from your presentation, you mentioned one things about that. With this system, the farmers can even put the maximum capacity. So which is different from earlier. There was some discussion that free range, it has to use a lot of land. So that's not the case anymore.
No, it's still the case. Yeah. And the thing is, there are different rules and regulations for different countries. I mean, in the UK, we used to have a ridiculous amount of requirement for land for the birds. And even in the UK, they've kind of rationalized and reduced that. Ultimately, as long as the birds have access to range in free range situations, there doesn't have to be huge swathes of land. I think, crikey, I think South Africa, it's the requirement when I was there, it was something like 1.5 or 2 times the footprint of the building. So different countries, different regulations.
And the question might be,
sorry.
The question might be from the audience who see the chick in the hens in the picture. They want to know that with the cage-free system, those chicks, the beak are all trimmed, or
generally yes. Beak trimming still takes place. Again, different countries, different rules, different regulations. Yeah. And certainly in Europe, we went from a beak trimming process to a beak tipping process. Mm-hmm. And then also now there are lots of trials going on with no beak trimming whatsoever. And yeah, it's a difficult one. It really, really is difficult, because whilst, from a personal perspective, whilst we're always trying to look at welfare, if we're leaving a bird with a full beak and she's aggressive and she starts pecking all the other birds in there and damaging and vent pecking, then to me that's not helping welfare ultimately. So there's got to be a balance, in my opinion.
All right. So I think there is a request from the audience on the chat that if you may have the picture how the cage-free system works. Not the picture, the video. I think to the audience that request, I believe that you can reach to Paul, then his team can share the video. Because I'm afraid of the technical to share the video here. The next,
there are so many different ones as well. So
yes, understand. And you have.
Well, please contact myself or the sales teams, and then we'll be able to point you in the right direction.
Probably any salesperson from TECNO and AGCO, you can put on the chat for the email address. Then the audience can catch up with you after the webinar. The next question from our friend from Cambodia, Paul. He said, thank you very much for sharing about this system. You have many interesting systems. The question is, what is your recommendation for the farmers who have the cage system in small and medium scale of production? They can turn into a cage-free system?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. as I say, if it's someone who wants to, let's say, change the production, so take the cages out and then put in a new cage-free system, then really it's a case of getting in touch with ourselves and the sales guys, because we will then need to come out and take a look at the existing house that you've got, take all the measurements, because there are only certain sizes and certain configurations that we'll need to design to fit into that house to give you the maximum number of birds. So it really does depend on what the farmer wants to do. Does he want to build new, or does he want to convert what he's got existing? And that's where we come in as sales guys and technical advisors to look at what's available and try and give clients the best solution for whatever capital expenditure they've got, or how many birds they need.
Yes, I think the presentation from you has put many type, and you can do customize in corner, in the middle, or in half of the.
It's been an evolution, because as we say, we've got different clients. We've got clients coming from cage systems. We've got clients who have never done anything in poultry before in their lives. So, and also what we see more and more globally is that there are more and more restrictions on planning permissions for these houses. Yes. So land can be really expensive. So we've got to try and increase the volume, or planning restrictions may say that you can only build a small building because the neighbours don't want to see chicken house roofs. So that's also why we have such a varied range of solutions available. I think our industry get pressure by the retail business and also pressure by the sustainability development goal. Pressure from every angle. Absolutely. Yes. So come to last two questions. It is that I think our friend from either Bangladesh or Malaysia, when come to the egg price, I can answer for Paul, but let Paul answer on Europe. The price between cage and cage free, it's comparing, or? Oh no, you'll get it's definitely the price. You'll get paid more for a cage free egg, certainly, than you will for a cage egg, without a shadow of a doubt. It's got to be that way. And then, it's a completely different production method. It's a lot more intensive. So the actual production costs are by nature higher. And also, at the end of the day, the retailers, they will also charge more for that particular egg as well. So no, you could always expect a premium for a cage-free egg compared to a caged egg, for sure. I think this also, I would suggest the audience to attend tomorrow. There will be a session on global food partner. They will introduce about the alliance, how to the revolution for Asia to be in the cage-free system. There is some of incentive-wise on the partnership alliance on the cage-free production. So please feel free to join tomorrow. My last question, Paul, about the kill injuries. So how you see how to handle to reduce the kill injuries? To me, the biggest thing, we're back to the start of it all again. It's actual rearing. It's down to rearing, to make sure that these birds are reared in an environment where they're strong, they're robust, they're used to jumping from one level to another. Because most of the keel bone injuries and things like that, they come from if they get spooked, if the birds get spooked easily in these systems. If they just fly, there's so much more equipment in there that they can hit. So, and generally they'll get flighty because they're not used to the environment that they're being transferred to. So that's certainly, again, back to rearing. That is a key thing. But then also it's very important, is stocking densities. There is a limit. There is a limit. You can only put so many birds per square meter before you take it over the edge and you're doing more damage than good. So that's the other thing that you've always got to strike the balance with, is stocking density, so that it's easier for the birds to move around the systems and prevent some of these bone damages that we see. There have been lots of trials done in the UK over the years, and one of the main key pointers was stocking density and rearing.
All right, Paul, I think the time is running out now. It's very great session. Congratulations to many AS that coming pipeline for our Asian customers to adapt and change and cope up with the pressure we get from the retail and sustainability issue. So like what I said, if anyone interested in knowing more and to understand what is really the cage-free system, do you have to remove everything